All right, everyone, there's a couple brand new Switch stories that just dropped today that we got to talk about, starting with a major milestone that the Nintendo Switch just crossed that's quite frankly pretty ridiculous, and we got to have a broader conversation of what this means for the future of the platform. Then the big talking point for today's video is Nintendo Switch Online and some hard evidence and data now that is suggesting that input lag on the platform was real up to this point in time, and that it is slowly being addressed by Nintendo as they are making behind the scenes tweaks to the emulators. And I want to break down all the information and also celebrate why this is a great news story for potentially a good looking future for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below. Hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, as I mentioned, guys, we got a couple big stories to talk about today, and I want to kick it off with a sales conversation around a major milestone that the Nintendo Switch just crossed, as of course we're going to expect this console over the course of time to knock off quite a few of the major competitors across the way who have historically held a very high number on the list of best-selling consoles of all time. And we can now confirm that the Nintendo Switch has actually crossed the PlayStation milestone of 102 million units, the original PlayStation console, which did hit that back in the day. And now the Nintendo Switch has surpassed it, and we have a few other ones on the list that it is fastly approaching, and I'm sure we'll really see it get there, especially when you zoom out and think about the entire life cycle of the Nintendo Switch console, as it's obviously a very successful thing for Nintendo. I don't think they're going to abandon it anytime soon, and we may see future revisions, which we'll talk about a little bit after we go over some of the data. But regardless, I do think that this thing is here to stay, and they've clearly struck gold with this hybrid form factor, which is unique in its own right, because of course they are now not worrying about selling a console and a DS or 3DS handheld exclusive system at the same time. So of course you have to have that conversation as well, and you even have to have the conversation that a portion of all of the Switch console sales are really only handheld, as they do go to the Nintendo Switch Lite model, and you can't even dock that system and play it on a TV. So is it in a unique category all on its own? Yes, it is. That said, this is still a very exciting conversation to have, and I'm very curious on how far this thing is going to go at the end of it. But to kick off this discussion, I do want to hop over to VG Charts, where they have the latest estimates on what the Nintendo Switch has sold and a breakdown of what consoles it's headed to surpass next, and then even a quick discussion around the best-selling Nintendo Switch games of all time. So let's quickly read through this together. Nintendo Switch outsells PS1 worldwide sales. The Nintendo Switch has outsold the lifetime sales of the PlayStation, aka the PS1 or PSX, according to VG Charts estimates. The Switch sold 341,662 units for the week ending in January 15th, 2021. I believe that's a typo, and they meant to say 2022, obviously, as some people have a hard time adjusting, myself included, to bring its lifetime sales to 102.81 million units. This compares to the PlayStation with sales of 102.5 million units lifetime. The figure for the Switch includes the combined sales of the original Switch model, the Switch Lite, and the Switch OLED. Nintendo's hybrid console has now become the 5th best-selling video game platform of all time. Next up is the PlayStation 4, which sold an estimated 116 million units to date, then the Game Boy plus Game Boy Color at 118 million units. The Switch is 13.77 million units away from the PlayStation 4 and 15.88 million units away from the Game Boy. Breaking down the sales of the Switch, it has sold 34.67 million units in the US, 27.22 million units in Europe, and 23.43 million units in Japan. Breaking down sales in Europe even further, it has sold 5.21 million units in the UK, 6.11 million in France, and 5.93 million in Germany. Shipment figures for the Nintendo Switch reached 92.8 million units as of September 30th, 2021, while 681 million Switch games had been shipped lifetime. Here's a list of the top 10 best-selling Nintendo Switch games according to Nintendo's shipment figures through September 30th. Now, coming in at number 1 on our list, we have our favorite game to talk about when it comes to sales figures of all time, which is none other than Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, coming in at 38.74 million units. And of course, this is as of September 2021, so we know it's fastly approaching the 40 million mark at this point, which is pretty insane to think about that Nintendo took a 2014 Wii U port, put it on the Nintendo Switch, and is effectively having one of their best sales figures of all times ever in terms of their entire game library and how well it's selling. So if you wonder where Mario Kart 9 is at, this is probably your answer. That said, hopefully we're a year or two out until we do get that long-awaited Mario Kart 9, or maybe they're going to skip it and call it X or Crossroads or whatever all these rumors suggest. It's very possible that we will get another Mario Kart soon, but why would Nintendo want to stop a game that has so much momentum behind it? So as somebody who's been patiently awaiting a future iteration since 2014, I will continue to sit tight and wait until we get some kind of official announcement. Now, number 2 is Animal Crossing New Horizons, which is pretty impressive whenever you think that this game just launched in March of 2020, and it is coming in at 34.85 million units sold, which is absolutely insane and really says a lot about what kind of franchise Animal Crossing is to Nintendo. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate comes in at 25.71 million. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, by far the best Zelda in terms of sales figures, is coming in at 24.13 million. Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield, a combined sales figure of 22.64 million at number 5 on the list. Number 6 on the list is Super Mario Odyssey at 21.95 million. Number 7, Super Mario Party at 16.48 million. Number 8, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee at a combined sales total of 13.83 million. Number 9, Splatoon 2 at 12.68 million, a very impressive number for that game. And number 10, Ring Fit Adventure at 12.21 million, which is pretty crazy if you think about a fitness game selling that well on the Switch. So really cool stuff to see. The Switch launched worldwide on March 3rd, 2017, whilst the PS5 launched in Japan on December 3rd, 1994, in North America on September 9th, 1995, and in Europe on September 29th, 1995. So, you know, when I see numbers and milestones crossed like this, I just think it's a very exciting time to be a Nintendo fan. As you know, somebody who saw the Wii U era, even the GameCube didn't really sell well at all in terms of compared to the competition, as the PS2 like completely dominated that entire console generation. It is a very exciting thing to see Nintendo have this continued momentum and continued revenue for them to continue producing titles on a very well-established platform at this point in time. And you can definitely argue that the Switch may need a more powerful iteration in the upcoming future, as I definitely lean that way. I do enjoy my OLED model. I love the upgrade that gave for handheld play, but there is still multi-platform versions of games coming out where I would want to get them on my Switch or the portable form factor ability, but I am more inclined to get it on something like the PS5 or Series X, or even if I had just the PS4 and I didn't have any of the next gen consoles, I might want to get it on that because it'll run 60 frames per second or it'll look better. So I really do hope that Nintendo, you know, in the upcoming next few years, either do a more powerful revision, which is looking less and less likely. It may actually just be we're sitting here waiting until something like 2024 for the next true next gen Switch platform or whatever Nintendo's going to call it to launch. I definitely think it's very likely that we see another revision for something like an OLED Switch Lite. That definitely makes a ton of sense. And I could even see them doing something where they maybe release an all digital console later on in the Switch's life cycle, as there were some leaks and rumors suggesting that that's a real project that Nintendo's working on. All of this stuff remains to be seen, but when you talk about multiple revisions potentially still coming out in this console's life cycle, and you talk about the fact that Nintendo will continue to sell the original Switch, or at least the OLED model, into whatever their next hardware life cycle is, as well as they will probably just discount that system and give it a true second wind in its sales figures, I think we're poised to see this be one of the best-selling video game consoles of all time ever, which is a crazy thought to have, as that would mean the Switch needs to cross 155 million units, which is what the Sony PlayStation 2 sold in its total life cycle, and that will also dethrone the DS family of systems that is, you know, technically number 2 in terms of a console sales. Even though it's a handheld console, it's still, I guess, technically a console, you could say. So regardless, this is exciting news in my books. I do want to hear from you guys in the comments down below what your personal predictions are with the future of the Nintendo Switch sales, whether or not you think Nintendo will lose some of this momentum as we're fastly approaching the 5th full year of the Switch being sold on the market, or if you think we may get more revisions and actually have a longer life cycle ahead than maybe even we think right now. And bonus question, let me know which revisions, like a Switch Lite OLED or whether it be a more powerful Switch, you personally predict Nintendo will come out with in the future. So I do look forward to hearing from you guys on all things Switch revision speculation, and also just your overall opinion on their sales numbers and what they're doing with the Switch platform in the comments down below. Now, the big story we're talking about today has to do with, of course, once again, Nintendo Switch Online and some improvements that I've been covering here on the channel as we go along. And it's always interesting to me when I put out there the idea that I experience input lag in games like Ocarina of Time, as that's the one that really stuck out to me the most over everything. And I would see a decent number of comments of users saying it's not there, it's not real, there's no input delay, it works fine for me. And it always kind of baffled me because as somebody who grew up playing it numerous times over on the original N64 hardware, and then also playing Ocarina of Time, like probably the majority on the GameCube as part of the collection set that was a promotional disc where you got the 4 Legend of Zelda games all in one, where it was like the original Legend of Zelda, Adventure of Link, and then you also got a Wind Waker demo, and you got Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. That's how I played the majority of my playthroughs of the game, and I just knew immediately when I booted up the NSO that there was clear input delay. And the reason I want to revisit this topic is because, of course, while we've given Nintendo a ton of scrutiny here on the channel around their decision with pricing on the NSO N64 expansion pack, and then once the service launched, the poor state that a lot of the games played in, and we still don't have everything fixed, to be clear. The fog effect is clearly still missing from Ocarina of Time, and that has not been fully addressed or updated. That said, I was always worried as a Nintendo fan that I would see them do something very Nintendo-like, which is just not address it and also potentially not fix it. And I do think that a lot of people speaking out and talking about these things online has definitely helped bring awareness of these issues to Nintendo, and they're at least addressing it. And while it's not all immediately fixed overnight, as the service goes on, we can at least see kind of a picture of an idea of a brighter future, that Nintendo eventually gets this emulation tactic completely fleshed out, and that everything will one day run as close to it did on its original hardware, but just obviously with the better resolution and all of the enhancements that we can expect to come along with the newer emulation technology. So the reason it's in the news today is MVG did do a fantastic video yesterday breaking down his own personal experience with input delay. It then got picked up by a lot of different news articles and things online. And then shout out to RGT85. I watched his video earlier, and he actually cited a Reddit user that found in their own separate test, besides what MVG had done, that he had confirmed that Mario 64 had larger input delay than what it had on the Mario 3D All-Stars collection. And after some tests, that he could confirm that it actually was reduced by about 20 milliseconds. So we're going to go over all the data together. I want to quickly start off the conversation by hopping over to VGC, where they do have an exact transcript typed up around what's been said and what these claims are. And then we will also reference that Reddit user who also pointed out the same findings. So let's quickly read through all this information together. Switch Online's N64 input lag is improving, it's claimed. The service's latest update hasn't just fixed some graphical issues. The recent update to Nintendo Switch Online's Nintendo 64 app has also improved the emulation's input lag, it's been claimed. When Banjo-Kazooie was added to the service last week, it came with a version 1.2 update for the app's N64 emulator, which fixed some of the graphical issues players had been experiencing in games like The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, YouTube channel Modern Vintage Gamer states that as well as the graphical improvements, the update also appears to have reduced input lag to the extent that it's less problematic in some games and practically impossible to spot in others. The input lag has had some work, he explained. It's certainly not fixed, but it's better than the original release, and it does show me that Nintendo is listening, or at least reading the feedback and trying to address these things. He then illustrated this by showing his previous input lag tests on The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, comparing the response time between the original Switch Online release and how it runs now. Previously, on the original version on Nintendo Switch Online, I was calculating between 5 to 6 frames of input lag, he said. And while still present once again in the updated 1.2 version, input lag is reduced by about 1 to 2 frames. Again, this is not perfect, and due to the nature of emulation, it may never be, but it's clear Nintendo has reduced lag here, and overall the game does feel much better to play, so this is quite a good result. Now then, to quickly highlight a separate source where a Reddit user has found this on their own research, and I will have the link to this full article in the description down below under the sources section in case you guys are interested in reading the whole thing, but I do want to highlight a couple things that he had to say here. Input latency in the N64 NSO emulator has seemingly been reduced by 20 milliseconds. I conducted latency tests in Mario 64 when N64 NSO first launched and determined that Mario 64 on NSO had roughly 40 milliseconds more input latency than the Super Mario 3D All-Star version of Mario 64 and 50 milliseconds more latency than a modern emulator at full speed tweaked for latency reduction. After the recent NSO update, I conducted new latency tests which are currently yielding interesting results. The takeaway is that I believe latency has been reduced by 20 milliseconds or almost one frame in Mario 64. A single frame in Mario 64 is 33 milliseconds. Nintendo has seemingly improved the input latency of the N64 NSO emulator by roughly 20 milliseconds and average over multiple tests, cutting the latency differential comparison of a modern N64 emulator almost in half. In my personal opinion, this makes the game far more playable. So you clearly can look at this and say, well, you know what? Mario 3D All-Star still runs Mario 64 better, and there are still better ways to play Ocarina of Time out there, so Nintendo is still definitely dropping the ball with the service. And while I totally see that side of the perspective out there, I do want to say that progress still needs to be celebrated, and it is a good thing overall. I personally, with all of these changes, still don't feel like the $50 annual asking price for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack is truly worth it in my book, but I am hopeful that over the course of a year or so that the service is live and continual updates are starting to be made, that maybe one day in the near future we can all look back and say that this service is well worth it. I will definitely have my eyes on the Majora's Mask launch that is set for February, as I am super hoping that they get this whole fog rendering issue figured out for that game, because if you know anything about that game, it tries to aim for a very dark, eerie vibe, and I think it needs the fog to really deliver some of those moments, at least how they were intended to be experienced. So this is an ongoing situation unfolding. It's just nice to see Nintendo address some problems where over the course of time we have seen them act like these problems that people are complaining about are not real at all, and nothing ever happens or no fixes are ever implemented. So while it is not in a perfect state today, it is at least getting better, and I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below what Nintendo needs to do to really make this service worth that $50 annual asking price for you. I also hope we get a monthly option, so let me know if you would like that as well, so that way you can test out the service without having to pay for a whole year. But regardless, I want to hear your opinions on these ongoing fixes to the N64 emulation and how your experience has been with all of the different games so far. So I do look forward to hearing from you guys on both the stories we talked about today in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. I do truly appreciate you all sticking around until the end. I do at this point in the video want to invite you all one more time to join Sunbro Nation if you haven't done so already. Do so by subscribing below, hit the like button on your way out if you enjoyed it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. That's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you all have a great day. Sunbro Nation, out.